All right, welcome everyone. We're going to begin. Excuse the headset, but we are broadcasting live right now through a webinar. This is the first time we're doing this. So we'll see. Hopefully it will work out real well. That's that little bar in the corner, and hopefully we'll have some lively interaction at the end, asking those that are participating on the webinar to ask questions as well. So again, my name is Jaclyn Rhoads. I am the Assistant Executive Director at Pinelands Preservation Alliance. Welcome to our headquarters. How many people have been here before? Very good. I'm very happy to see that. So we're a member-based organization, nonprofit advocacy group, obviously fighting to protect the Pinelands. We're here tonight, obviously, as it relates to the pipelines that are being proposed through the Pinelands areas, and we'll get more details later on. Just in terms of logistics, I think I mentioned a little earlier, but for those that came in late, we have a restroom in the back. We do have additional restrooms across the way into our farmhouse building. And we do have material in the back, both from Food and Water Watch as well as Pinelands Preservation Alliance, giving updates on the pipelines, as well as some useful tools and material like resolutions, which we will be talking about later again as well. And we do have refreshments. There's water, some soda in the refrigerator back there, as well as iced tea. And then we will break midway about 7:30. Help yourself to some food, and then we will resume again for the last hour. Does anybody have any questions regarding all of that? No? Sounds good. Okay, so Lena Smith, South Jersey organizer with Food and Water Watch, is going to begin our presentation tonight. And we'll give an update first on the status of pipelines. Food and Water Watch will talk about fracking. I will then talk about the 2 pipelines that are being proposed through the Pinelands. We'll take a break, and then we'll talk about what you can do about it and what you could do going back to your towns and passing resolutions. Did I miss anything?
Did you mention where the bathrooms are?
I think I did.
And the nearest exit?
And the nearest exit? Windows? Besides the door. So I will now turn it over to Lena. It feels a little weird, like you're talking to yourself.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. And thank you, Jaclyn and the Pinelands Preservation Alliance, for hosting this event with us this evening. This is I'm excited. So, and again, so my name is Lena, and I'm the South Jersey organizer with Food and Water Watch. And if you haven't interacted with Food and Water Watch before, we're a national advocacy organization that champions clean drinking water and safe, affordable food. And right now we're working on Pinelands primarily in the southern part of the state, and projects in the northern part of the state, which other co-workers are working on. So. Again, Jaclyn just spoke about the agenda for tonight. We're going to talk about fracking. I'm going to give kind of an introduction to what is fracking and talk about how it connects to all of these pipelines that are being built in New Jersey. And then we'll talk about the tactic, what we're going to do to stop them. All right, so fracking. Have you heard of it? And what have you heard? It's safe. What else have you heard? It blows up. Have you seen Gaslands? Have you? Okay. A lot, their taps being set on fire. And so when we're talking about fracking, we're talking about both the process, the actual fracking, as well as all of the harms and the buildup of infrastructure and waste that result because of fracking. So is fracking happening in New Jersey? And the answer is no, but it's happening in our very close neighbors. So you see, these are all the major shale regions in the US, and here's the Marcellus Shale and the Utica Shale, and those are the 2 biggest ones on the Northeast and in the United States. And so we are kind of getting all the results of fracking. Well, not all the results, I guess. I would say the Pennsylvanians are also impacted by it tremendously, but kind of the infrastructure is being pushed directly to New Jersey. So what is fracking? Or I guess the full word is hydraulic fracturing. And the process is used to extract natural gas and petroleum from the center of the earth. It's pressurized water, sand, and a cocktail of unknown chemicals are injected into the shale and release the oil. So the chemicals that are used haven't been released publicly. We don't really know what they're using, but we have some knowledge because we've done some research. They shoot high pressure high pressure of water and chemicals and sand into the earth, and then it breaks apart the rocks and releases the oil and gas that's in the earth. And these rock formations go for about 2 miles horizontally, and I'm going to move on because this actually talks about it better. So in the past 40 years, the fracking has been happening, well, not fracking, but we've been drilling conventional wells vertically, and to just get at the pool of gas that's right at the surface there. And now we've used up all of the resources, or the majority of these resources, so we're going deeper to access what is deeper, and what it is in rocks. So to get at the oil and the gas that's in the rocks, they need to be broken apart. So that's why the horizontal well is happening. And then, as I said, the mixture, the cocktail of chemicals and water and sand are being shot into the rock at high pressures to break apart the rock and release the pores, or release the natural gas and the petroleum that is in the pores of the rocks. So some of the environmental impacts that we've seen and that we know are happening. First, there are significant greenhouse gas emissions, which I'll speak more about later, but they emit a lot of methane. And then the consumptive use of water. Each well uses between 2 to 9 million gallons of water, and wells can be fracked 2 to 3 times. So for one single well, 9 times 3 is 21 million gallons of water. And some of the chemicals that are being used they contain carcinogens such as benzene, methanol, naphthalene, and formaldehyde, and endocrine and disruptors such as methanol. So all of this water gets mixed with these chemicals, and then it produces a wastewater that contains radionuclides, arsenic, and heavy metals. And so and then these companies are not required to disclose the chemicals they're using because they're exempt from the Safe Drinking Water Act and the Clean Water Act. This waste is one issue that we've been working on in other parts of the state, because it is being shipped to New Jersey and dumped in waste facilities here, as well as it's being used. It's being mixed with de-icer for the winter and being put on the roads, which will then run off into the soil. Yeah.
What you just stated about the fact that they use it for de-icing. What I noticed over the last year and a half or 2 years from the winters was along the roads, everything's burned. Seriously burned.
Yeah.
From the solutions that they were using. And I kept saying, why is the vegetation dead? It's actually an impact of what you're stating. And whatever they're putting on those roads, I mean, you
Hmm. Yeah. So if it's dead up here, imagine what it's doing down here. Yeah, when it. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, yeah. So for the, I'm going to repeat that for my remote viewers, but she was talking about how this winter, the past 2 years, she's seen along the edge of the highways how it's actually been burned, the vegetation, and so she's been noticing the impact of this de-icing chemical waste mix, and so the fact that they're using it on as de-icing was a good revelation for her. All right. What else do we know about natural gas? It's explosive, and so the Marcellus shale natural gas that is being extracted from Pennsylvania is what's coming through these pipelines, and it's flammable and it's toxic. And so bringing this fuel into our state endangers our families, property, and the environment. And this is a little bit more about the emissions that and the impact that they're having on the climate. So one argument is that natural gas is a good alternative and will help reduce the climate change or slow down climate change. But actually, natural gas burns the methane that is emitted traps more heat than CO2 by up to 70%. Methane leaks at all phases of natural gas production. There are over 100,000 wells in the US and millions of miles of pipeline and compressor stations, all leaking countless amounts of heat trapping methane into the environment. So it's really not a good alternative to our current dependence. All right. So to get into pipelines specifically, what do pipelines have to do with fracking? And fracking has allowed for the extraction of high amounts of natural gas and petroleum. And there's this big supply of natural gas, but there's not access points. There's not the market. So the pipelines are creating the market. So right now, I was just speaking, and there's a really low price for gas, and because there's a huge supply. But with these pipelines, it would allow for the gas to access the market, and the prices would then go up, so the companies would receive a profit. So there are a lot of ways that they're trying to increase the infrastructure across the state, not just through pipelines, but also through oil by rail. You might have heard about bomb trains or crude by rail. That's one way that they're increasing their transport, as well as exporting it to other countries. So LNG facilities LNG stands for liquefied natural gas, which is a process to turn the natural gas into a liquid that can be more easily transported. And there's a proposed facility off the coast of New York and New Jersey that will allow for that to happen. And there's other facilities being proposed so that in the LNG facilities, they would process it into the natural gas into LNG and then export it to other countries to meet the market demand. So, but one argument of the oil by rail, or excuse me, the gas by rail, is that, you know, we're saying it's dangerous, and so the pipeline companies are taking up this opportunity to say, well, pipelines are less dangerous, so let's build pipelines instead. So we're going to talk about why that isn't a good alternative. So the pipeline construction steps, it's laid out here, but I'll walk you through them so that you can get a good sense of it. So first you have a beautiful forest, pinelands, no damages, and then there's surveying and clearing of the land happening here. And then they begin to lay, so this is surveying and clearing out the land. Then they'll lay out the pipe sections alongside the land that they've cleared. And then they'll begin to weld the pipe sections together so that it's all ready to lay down. And then they'll begin digging the pipeline trench. So this is what that's supposed to be doing. This isn't very clear, but so you all received a hard drive or a thumb drive, and this is included on your thumb drive. But they'll dig the pipeline trench, and then they'll do some inspections, and then the pipeline will be lowered into the trench, and then they'll backfill the hole, and then they'll do some hydro testing of the pipeline, and then they'll do some site restoration. I'm not sure. So pipelines are also explosive because they're carrying the gas from Marcellus Shale that's explosive, and particularly they're in some of the pipelines that are coming through this part of the state, they're high pressure transmission pipelines, so even more pressure to explode. And between 2010 and 2015, there were 3,141 pipeline explosion, leak, or spill-related incidents, injuring 369 people and killing 78. In January, a pipeline exploded in Brooke County, West Virginia. The pipeline ran adjacent to a residential area where one home had to be evacuated. And then recently in April, a gas pipeline exploded near Fresno, California, injuring 13 people and shutting down a major highway. And in consideration with these pipelines is the impact radius, which is the distance from the pipeline at which an explosion could cause a death, injury, or property damage. And I'm not sure for the pipelines that are being proposed for this part of the state what their actual impact radius is, but for example, a 42-inch pipeline at a pressure of 1,440 psi's has its impact radius is over 1,000 feet. It's like 1,100 feet. So some of the pipelines we're going to talk about houses are within 50 feet of that.
I lived up on Durham once when that exploded, and that radius, when that went off, I was living, it's private country, so I was living towards the ground level.
Yeah.
It was immense. So I was miles away from there. So what they're proposing here, and you're stating about the fact that the impact of the, of one house or two houses and the radius, it's huge. It's miles.
Mm-hmm.
It's not feet, it's miles. I don't know if any people live by Bakersfield Base, and they have the impact and proving grounds up there where they explode, old ammunition or whatever. I could feel it in Jackson. And when I lived in Brownsville, I felt it there more so, but Jackson is 25 miles away from where they're going. So if I feel it there, just think that this would happen.
Okay.
It's tremendous. It's
yeah.
not small little dusty document.
Yeah, thank you. So for my,
I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. She was just mentioning that when she lived near Durham Woods, she felt the Durham Woods explosion, and she still lived relatively far away, but could feel it in the ground and can feel the explosions at the military base as well, and it felt a lot like that. So this is a map of incidents in the United States of explosions, leaks, and spills. The blue are gas and the orange are liquids, which I think is referring to oil and petroleum products. So you can see this is between 2010 and 2015. Yes, that we know about. And why are they exploding? And can they really be regulated well? No. There's a lack of oversight and monitoring. The PHMSA, which is the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, has only 139 inspectors to oversee 2.6 million miles of pipeline. And they're behind in their inspections. Only 1/5 of the pipeline system has been inspected by PHMSA or its state partners since 2006. And a study found that most pipeline operators don't want to upgrade detection systems fearing costs and false alarms. So they're more worried about the costs than our safety and risk of explosion. And here are some more reasons why. For example, there's no industry standard for how quickly pipeline leaks must be identified. The specific detection systems only are required in certain environmentally sensitive or populated areas, not along an entire pipeline route. So maybe near a dense population area, they might have a detection system for a leak, but they wouldn't in another area that still would be populated, although less so. And in New Jersey, there's people almost everywhere. It's a very highly populated state. And Congress called for a new leak detection system regulations in 2011, but the PHMSA is still working on them. All right. I'm going to turn it over to Jaclyn now to talk more specifically about the pipelines in South Jersey that we're seeing and the current phase of the process that they're in. So.
All right, thank you, Lena, for that good information about basically where the gas is coming from, right? Where are we getting these sources? Kind of what is the motivation for putting in so many pipelines? And as she stated, there is this great supply now, and they're trying to increase that demand by providing the places to release that natural gas. So just taking a step back on the Pinelands, I see a number of people have this, but this is our State of the Pinelands report here. And I do not have a slide on this, and usually we have a map here, which I forgot to bring over, but I want to share with you just so you know, for those that may not, in terms of why these pipelines, it is critical where they're placed and why we have such issues with them. And so on the back of this State of the Pinelands report, which we put out every year, it gives an update on a variety of issues, we have the map. And this is the map that outlines the Pinelands plan in which it applies to these areas throughout the 1.1 million acres that have been identified both in the federal and state acts that were passed back in 1979 and 1980. So what's critical about this map and about what Pinelands Preservation Alliance does is that we want to make sure that these, let's say, green areas, mostly green, this is the core pine barrens, you have a lot of state forests, and forest area, which is the dark green, remain intact, right? These are areas where we have very little to no development. These are areas that you want to have intact forests. These are areas that are protecting a critical part of our aquifer. And so Pinelands Preservation Alliance, focused for its 26 years, is about supporting that plan, an innovative plan that was created many years ago that has worked to see the Pinelands being a dark spot in a bright sky throughout the state of New Jersey. Now, what's critical is that these two pipelines, and I'll get into more detail, want to go through an area that are through these green zones, essentially. One of which is the South Jersey gas pipeline that's across through a forest area. Another in which wants to go through what is considered actually part of the preservation zone, but it's part of a military installation. And although we have a number of groups that are very much opposed to these pipelines, residents, different communities, municipalities, Pinelands Preservation Alliance wants to make sure we're focused on this plan and making sure it's supported. So I will tell you that, there is infrastructure allowed through the Pinelands. So there may be cases where through a community they're bringing additional pipeline through for natural gas that feeds to individual residents, right? These pipelines are different. In those cases, if they're following the plan, they're allowed, and that is something that we don't bring an issue to bear with the Pinelands Commission, which is the authority that basically reviews public development applications. They also review private development applications. And so I just wanted to share that with you, and this is an important map to look at, as well as on the back here it talks about the Pinelands, the history behind it, the comprehensive management plan, which outlines where things can be built and where things cannot be built, and guiding that process every step of the way to make sure that the place still looks like this. And for the most part, it has been very successful. And it's been successful not only because of the residents in the area that are concerned about it, because of the organization, Pinelands Preservation Alliance, that was formed, but also by the people that are very much involved with and knowing this area and our members. And that's critical to keep this work going every day. So I just wanted to give that background and before we move into each of the pipeline projects. So South Jersey Gas, right? How many people attended Pinelands Commission meetings? I see so many familiar faces. So a majority of the crowd here have attended at least one of those Pinelands Commission meetings, right? And we had t-shirts on, which I can't fail to mention that we still have some available that say Pinelands, not pipelines. So if you're interested, we do have them. And so South Jersey Gas, a 22-mile natural gas pipeline going through the forest area. Yes, it is true. It is following along a roadway, but going through an area that, according to the plan, should not have that kind of infrastructure unless it is serving the needs immediately and directly of those Pinelands residents, or there's a compelling public need. And there are processes for this, right? So they can either go through, if you're a private development or developer, like South Jersey Gas. It's not for a publicly owned entity. It's a private entity that's going to benefit directly from selling that gas and ultimately what they do with the natural gas that goes to the facility. They have a process to follow through the Pinelands Commission. So we're almost 2 years in fighting this project. And actually, I have a timeline after this map. And this is just an aerial view of where that pipeline is going. And I'll get into a little bit more of this, of what they're calling the preferred Route A, because if some of you are familiar, there was a recent release of a memo from the Department of Environmental Protection prompted by South Jersey Gas to evaluate all of their routes, because there were questions about, is this truly the best way to go if it was proved viable and needed to have that particular pipeline. So I will talk about that in a minute. So general, again, restating some of the facts here, South Jersey Gas wanted to bring natural gas to the BL England facility on Beasley's Point, starting out in Cumberland County, making their way through the forest area, ending at this facility. It was a facility that was directed to basically shut down or convert. It originally burnt coal and oil. It was under orders to close down and had been only operating for peak demand for a number of years until they received that ultimate closure order if they didn't convert over. South Jersey Gas proposed to bring natural gas to that facility and proposed that it would operate the facility year-round, which dramatically changes the scenario in terms of how that facility operated, the ultimate environmental protection that they say they were going to achieve by converting from coal and oil to natural gas. Peak facility to an all year round facility obviously changes that scenario significantly. So let's run through this brief history. I've highlighted just a couple of key points. Obviously, in between that March 2014 to just last month, a lot of things happened, not at the commission level, but I'll mention that in a minute. And so after several months of deliberation by the Pinelands Commission, many public hearings, many Pinelands Commission meetings, the commissioners voted and they did not approve the memorandum of agreement that was proposed before the Pinelands Commission in order to bring the South Jersey Gas pipeline through the Pinelands area. It was a tie vote, but according to the Comprehensive Management Plan, you need 8 affirmative votes, not 8 or not the majority, 8 regardless of how many people you have sitting at that table. So if they only had 10 Pinelands commissioners because people were absent or they had to recuse themselves, regardless, they needed 8. So even though one member had to recuse themselves, it wasn't enough that they only had 7 affirmative votes. So as a result of that, South Jersey Gas filed an appeal to the decision, which is still pending. They had the right to put that in. In addition, in the midst of all of this, there was also nominations to the Pinelands Commission from the governor's office to replace certain individuals. First, it was 2 commissioners. They did not get through in 2014. Then it was only 1 commissioner that was subject to a replacement. And you know, there's a whole lot of information here. We have articles in the back that talk about the Pinelands Commission nominations, what happened with South Jersey Gas, also a little bit about New Jersey Natural Gas. So I can't, in the midst of all our time, shed all of the details, as most of you are familiar with. So I'll just touch upon each of those topic areas. So what's important is more recently, after we have Commissioner Bob Jackson replaced on the Pinelands Commission with Mr. Robert Barr, this was building up. We always knew that South Jersey Gas was going to come back with either an alternative way, some revisions to its plan, or just bringing the same old pipeline back, but with a different board of Pinelands commissioners. So just recently, South Jersey Gas released a memo that they shared from New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. Basically, they had asked DEP to evaluate all of their routes, as well as some alternative routes that were stated in order for them to meet the requirements of the Pinelands plan, but still make their way to be a Lingham facility. According to DEP's evaluation, and again, we're not sure what departments or what offices within DEP evaluated, whether it was the Heritage Program, who from endangered species, who from water quality staff, we're unsure. We're still waiting to see that information. They evaluated for a couple of different things. They said wetlands, waterway crossings, threatened endangered species, and I believe there was one other item. And that based upon their evaluation, and they gave criteria for each one, like how many waterways were crossed, how much wetlands would be impacted, are there teeny species along this route, how many populations, they gave numbers for each one. They had said that South Jersey Gas preferred Route A was the best option. So, and I should say a lot of this information is on our website, uploading the memo, obviously the releases from South Jersey Gas. They've now hired a PR firm to actually share the information, which is interesting. So this happened right on the heels, right before South Jersey Gas announced that they've resubmitted a revised application to the Pinelands Commission, but this time as a private development application. So I should remind people that actually before the memorandum of agreement was started, South Jersey Gas had actually filed a private development application way back when. Seems like ages ago. And they were directed by the staff at the Pinelands Commission that it didn't meet the requirements of their plan and therefore required some kind of waiver, and they suggested going the route of memorandum of agreement. So now they're back full circle, going in as a private development application, which means a variety of things. It's not going to be the same process as we experienced last time. We are requesting now that there definitely be a hearing involved, but if it's a private development application, typically those kinds of applications are decided upon by the staff, by the executive director, and not by the full commission. So that is at a critical point. We think, how is it possible that now that the commission had decided upon, evaluated the same exact route, that now you're bringing it back under a different application process, and now you're going to allow that to be approved by the staff. They stack, which is interesting, yes. So there could be a variety of reasons for that. But anyway, we want to keep people or other certain politicians that also were very much involved in that process. So, and that leads me to, right, so they stacked the commission. Why did they do that if they're going in as a private development application? There could be a variety of reasons. One, they were only able to change out one particular individual. Two, we now have New Jersey Natural Gas that has received a lot of opposition from one county that has a seat on the Pinelands Commission that first was supportive of South Jersey Gas, but yet now they are opposed to New Jersey Natural Gas. So Burlington County has filed a petition against. Yes, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying now, so that representative had voted in favor of South Jersey Gas, but yet they are concerned with, and their county has filed against New Jersey Natural Gas. So you're changing the climate a bit here, the political climate, which may have thwarted South Jersey Gas from going in, again, under a waiver before the commission. So this represents some interesting circumstances that is going to change this process that we're experiencing and will be going through in looking at South Jersey Gas application as well as New Jersey Natural Gas. So as I stated already, we're evaluating the procedures. We're in the process of requesting clarification from the Pinelands Commission along with a number of other groups to make sure that we have a timeline, sufficient public review period. The South Jersey Gas application, new application, is now posted on the Pinelands Commission website, and we are posting the link from our website as well, and we will be sharing that.
You have to do like the environmental impact study and all that kind of stuff?
Well, they've submitted their application, which includes their evaluations and reviews. So we have just received a copy of the file. So we're going to review and make sure we post everything, but it will be a much quicker time frame. But again, we're hoping that we can nail down that timeline so people are very much aware and can participate in the process.
Is there a public comments process like there is in Fracking?
So somebody asked about the public comment process. That's what we need to know. We believe that there should be, well, I should tell you this. They had gone through and received their approval previously from BPU, in which that required a public comment period. The question is now that they've resubmitted their application but already had their approval from the Board of Public Utilities, would they have to do that again? I don't think so. So now that only means that you would have the public comment period before the Pinelands Commission.
But isn't this a whole new application that they should be starting from scratch? Right.
Well,
so whatever approval they have is.
But again, remember, so another person asked about having to start all over again and go through this process. But remember, that was considered a public development application waiver process through a memorandum of agreement. Has its own set of criteria, much longer criteria typically than a private development application. Typically, private development applications go through the town, they get their local approvals. The Pinelands Commission staff then reviews that local approval, and then they decide whether or not that raises any issues with them.
So why doesn't, I don't understand, you said that the Pinelands staff are the ones that approve it, not the Pinelands Commission. What's the purpose of having this Pinelands Commission if they're not voting on things like this?
They vote on certain things, yes, but the idea was when they first created this plan, the Pinelands Comprehensive Management Plan, and they've outlined procedures for private development applications, it was required that every municipality come into conformance with the plan. That means they've adopted all of their standards, and that they go through their local approval process. If it meets all their standards, the commission gets a review, but then the staff typically just says yay or nay. And they issue either a call-up letter, meaning we have issues with this particular application, or a no call-up saying it's good to go. The idea was you have so many private projects, you know, single-family homes, to go through the full commission every single time would be daunting. And then that also for public development, because it raises, you know, typically these might be bigger projects, it requires public review, that would be its own set of standards. So I can't speak to the whole mindset behind it. Obviously, in these type of circumstances, it raises some serious concerns.
So, I mean, you're talking about the size of the project. I mean, it's ridiculous to compare a project like this to a homes connecting to the sewers or
Yes.
something like that.
So people are concerned about this process. So there are a number of staff members. So the executive director is Nancy Wittenberg, and then they have certain key staff that are responsible for planning and development applications. And then they have staff underneath them that go through the day-to-day responsibilities of either reviewing applications. I mean, there's just a whole variety. They are all paid. They're all public. No, they're not appointed. So only the Pinelands commissioners are appointed by either the county, Department of Interior, or the governor. So I will take one more question about this because then we have to move into New Jersey natural gas, and then we will still have more questions later on.
You said the private development application must be approved by the municipality. Does that mean it has to be approved by every municipality that passes through?
Well, yes, and that raises another wrinkle. So the question was whether or not the private development application has to get approval but from the local municipalities. And that's why we see this project as unique, because it's a infrastructure project that actually you can get a waiver of local approval from the Board of Public Utilities. So for those that are online, there were a lot of moans and groans if you didn't hear that. So that's where we see it as a problem, because you're in direct conflict with the comprehensive management plan, which requires those local review and approvals. And if you are now averting that whole process by getting a waiver from the Board of Public Utilities, how can the commission actually review a private development application without that local approval? So, of course, we have lawyers looking into this, and again, a lot of different layers, a lot of different complications. Okay? So moving on, New Jersey natural gas. So New Jersey natural gas, similar application process. They've submitted to the Pinelands Commission, New Jersey Natural Gas, what they're calling their Southern Reliability Link Pipeline. As you can see here on the screen, that the project starts from the Turnpike, runs from Chesterfield in Burlington County all the way through to where it ends in Ocean County. It passes through a portion of the Pinelands when it hits Route 539, passing through Plumstead Township through the Joint Base, which is considered, if you look on your map, you will see an area that's like a bluish color, bluish purple, that's military and federal installation. The original concept of that this was actually part of the preservation zone of the Pinelands, but when they developed the comprehensive management plan map, because it represents, and it's definitely a federal installation, military installation, they decided to highlight that as a different management area. Just it ends over here in Ocean County, in which they want to provide, like we said, reliability. Can you see that? Well, you have the copy in on the flash drive that you've been given. Oh, there's a hard copy too in your folder, so you could take a look at that, and we could go into more details. You look at the map. Yep.
Just a note on this map. There were several of us who went to the Burlington County Freeholders meeting last night, and when the Chesterfield Township homeowners complained, presented petitions, et cetera, they said they are unable to get any definite map. And what they did get was not necessarily a final map, and there were no street names on it for their town. Then the county
For Chesterfield.
And the county engineer then jumped in. It was a very lively discussion, and he said that they have been unable many times to get a real map. So just to let you know, this is a map, but no one really in the Burlington County area has what's been represented as a true and accurate map.
So, comment from the audience was that last night there was a Burlington County freeholder meeting in which several people had attended, and the issue of New Jersey Natural Gas was brought up because Burlington County had filed a petition to BPU to intervene in the matter of New Jersey Natural Gas application to the Board of Public Utilities. So it is within the right, within so many days of when the applicant files with BPU for this expedited permitting, that those affected municipalities as well as the county can submit to intervene on that particular case. And they have to give their justification and reasoning how they are affected that they can justify intervening. And so Burlington County had requested additional information on very specifically where New Jersey Gas was laying pipeline through Burlington County and some of the affected communities there, and they're still waiting on information. I believe they've been waiting for, 5 weeks? Something along those lines. The map that we have, though, is a map that was supplied by New Jersey Natural Gas to the Board of Public Utilities, is what we have. Yeah. Question?
They're starting in the substation at Chesterfield, right? And what's the purpose of this whole, this, because my concern right now is what's happening in Jackson Township, Great Adventure, okay? Now, this line runs right behind Reed Road there, okay? So they're looking to clear the entire forest out, 500 acres, to put in hotels, okay? I bought the solar farm. Now they're in litigations, okay? We've got a couple of that, which is awesome.
Yes.
I was the only, myself and Blanche Krugner were the only two commissioners that said no. And the way this application came in, it was so rapid fast, it was like, no way. There's also other things that you have to, well, when I looked at this and I said, okay, well, now if they're considering doing other changes, I mean, there's other considerations that they are looking at. All right. But when I looked at this, have to look at the fact that Great Adventure may be part of pushing this gas line through too. There's lobbyists that are doing backdoor actions that are crushing us from the top, from the state level all the way down to the local level. Our chairman of our commission is now a lobbyist for one of the largest supposedly environmental companies, but he's done only wrong things for us. My concern is if this thing goes through and Great Adventure's backing it, that's another one you have to look at.
Right.
Because it's explosive, completely all the way down. I looked at that and I said, what if it's going from one point to the other point? I mean, even if it goes from Baker's Naval Base and that whole area there, it's all contaminated wetlands. It's groundwater problems.
Well, there are a number of issues with this particular pipeline that maybe we didn't have quite as many in terms of the wetland impacts as well as threatened endangered species that we did with South Jersey Gas that we will likely have with New Jersey Natural Gas.
When I looked at the EIS for the solar farm, and I evaluated that and walked the property, I found out that the NJDEP brought out a green board individual who was just right out of college to go and evaluate wetlands, delineate. And I said, how could you do that? I asked Brian Anderson, who was in charge of that. I says, I cannot believe that you are allowing this young girl to go out. Her resume states that she just graduated college. Where's the proof that she understands how to delineate wetlands? She lives in Jersey City, for God's sakes.
Well, I'm sure there are a number of issues, so just so people know that.
And the ones that they've done in South Jersey, I would ask for those reports. Every last one of them. Who was the individual? And not only that, Brian did not even sign the report for our EIS. He had some other young girl sign it. So, you know, it's a problem across the board. And then you've got the lobbyists that are, coming down here to Pinelands and making deals.
Oh, there are a lot of interconnections. There's no doubt about it. Not only with the pipelines, but with the individuals. So just so people know that are online, so there's concern because of projects undergoing in Jackson in which this pipeline would pass through, and whether or not there are connections there related to, development that's going on there, solar field that they want to create next to Great Adventure, as well as a variety of other things that, it's important for local residents to really be made aware and look at and evaluate all those specifics, especially I would say that because, our organization is focused on the Pinelands, and although this passes through the Pinelands area, we may not be involved in all the other areas that fall outside our boundary, and that's where we really rely on other groups that are focused on this, as well as residents that are definitely concerned about it. So it's definitely an issue. I mean, to understand more about the motivation, again, it was to provide reliability. They were talking about Hurricane Sandy again, and that in Ocean County, we want to make sure that we have another source when things fail. So obviously, thus reliability link, right? You can't run away from it now. They can't change their mind. So in terms of that process, again, New Jersey Natural Gas was looking for an expedited permit. They were looking for a very quick time, timeline in terms of when they would obtain their permits and begin construction. So they want to start in the fall. I highly doubt that process is going to move that fast, considering they haven't received, I believe, their like docket number from BPU, and there have been a number of not only municipalities but now the county that have filed to intervene on that matter. So they have to go through BPU, they have to get their approval, they have to get a number of permits. They have put in for the Pinelands Commission an application, but because there's still information missing from that application, we highly doubt they're going to get a letter that the application was complete. I think they were just trying to put all their little pieces in as they're waiting to try to push this process through a lot quicker.
They're coming in as private.
Yes. Yes. And I will say this, that is the proper process to go through, is a private development application. What South Jersey Gas was doing before was disguising themselves as a public development application, using BPU as cover, thinking they could get around all of the requirements of the CMP by then offsetting all of their damages and violating the plan by then giving a lump sum of money. Through this process, if you evaluate and compare the pipeline and meeting the CMP requirements for South Jersey Gas, for instance, we don't see how it would meet the plan, and therefore you easily deny it. New Jersey Natural Gas, we have to see, again, how they've identified that there is a need. Now, if the joint base, clearly states that they need this pipeline and that it will serve them, that may give the Pinelands Commission enough cover to say, okay, this can go through because then it meets all of our requirements, assuming that, again, there's no impacts to threatened and endangered species, because they have to meet all the other environmental requirements within the plan. But we have yet to see that piece of information supplied in the application as of today. So more will come from New Jersey Natural Gas. So running just close to being on time, maybe a little bit over. We're going to take a break now. We're giving an update of kind of where we are today on these pipeline issues. And then when we come back, we're going to resume with what you could do, outlining how you could work with your municipality, try to get resolutions passed, because that really sends an important message, and we'll run that process through step by step over the next 45 minutes. So please help yourself to some food.
Oppose fracking, right? We talked about at the beginning how that contributes to these pipelines. So getting involved in campaigns to ban fracking, as well as all forms of infrastructure fights that are happening across the state. That's one way, like on a larger scale about these pipeline projects. Specifically for these ones, what are we going to do? Well, okay, one more plug. Clean energy alternatives that really by the year 2050, we could be 100% dependent on clean energy if this natural gas, if we were able to slow down the natural gas industry, but because of their power with lobbyists and policy, it's really making it difficult. So, all right. So we're going to take action. And we are, how do we organize ourselves? We are asking for you to introduce a municipal resolution to oppose pipelines in your communities. And there are copies of these in your folder, but how do you introduce, we're going to go into some more of the details, but you need to contact your local elected officials, talk to your friends and neighbors, and attend a local council meeting. And then introducing resolutions. Okay, so the way that we're going about this strategy is that Burlington County appoints a commissioner, or county officials, freeholders, appoint commissioners to the Pinelands Commission. And they can sway potentially their commissioners to vote a certain way over a pipeline. So to influence the freeholders, we first need to start at the township levels and introduce resolutions opposing pipelines, so that and then these resolutions get passed up to the Board of Freeholders, and then the Board of Freeholders will, when we're pressuring them to then pass a countywide ban on pipelines. And fortunately, Burlington County is favorable to something like this, although I think they need a little bit more pressure. So the next meeting on June 10th, the freeholder meeting will be to ask them to introduce or pass a resolution. But then you personally can also work at the township level to introduce these township resolutions that we've included in your packet. So what are resolutions? A resolution is adopted by a town council or county freeholder, state legislature. So all of our different levels of state government can pass one of these, and it expresses an opinion on a matter, and it can vote an appreciation of or a censor, and extend a temporary or a special order. So I want to give some examples of resolutions I've seen in different municipalities that I've been in. Like last night at the Burlington County Freeholder meeting, they were passing a resolution to merge the prisons, the women's prison system. And then I've also seen resolutions passed where it's to acknowledge a member of the town for their service on a certain committee. So it's really just in recognition of something. But then you can also pass resolutions that say that a town, they support a ban on fracking waste. And these are statements by the council or the governing body. So they need to be approved by the majority of the governing entity at a public meeting. So at their public council meetings that are usually bi-weekly. And the resolutions are presented at one meeting and then adopted at a separate meeting. So they'll have like a first reading of the resolution, the first meeting. So it takes about, you can think about it as it's like a 3-week process. The first meeting, 2 meetings, 3 weeks if it's bi-weekly meetings. The first meeting, a council member will have it put on the agenda, they'll discuss it, and then the following meeting, they'll vote on it to approve or vote it down. And then resolutions can be presented by the public. So any member of a township can present a resolution to their council member. You can call or email them and say, hey, I have this great idea. I have this resolution that I want you to pass. Can you put it on the agenda? And then it needs to be introduced by a member of the governing board before the consideration of a vote. All right. So I'm going to keep going. And this is for either one, either or. Mm-hmm.
And I'll run through more of like
So,
a step-by-step, like how you can, there are alternate ways and really how you can mobilize. So.
Sorry, the question for my audience was, how do you get a council member to introduce a resolution? Do you have to go to a meeting and present it to them, or can you just email it to them or call them? And we said either or.
I just have a question, in terms of resolution versus ordinance. In my town, the ordinances are the ones that get introduced and then get voted on the next time. Resolutions are just put on and voted on at that meeting.
Huh.
So is this a resolution? I don't know if that's just unique to my town. No, that's what it is. So, resolutions just get put on the agenda and get voted on.
Okay.
So is that what we're looking to do as opposed to an ordinance? Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So the difference between an ordinance and a resolution is that ordinances need 2 meetings, and then a resolution needs just 1. They can put it on and vote on it. Okay. And ordinances need to be publicized where resolutions don't. Right. So that makes a lot of sense for other meetings that I've been to.
I didn't know either. I said, I'm glad to ask the question.
Yeah, that was helpful. Yeah, so again, in your folders and on the thumb drive are these resolutions. There are 2 versions of the resolution. One says route on the top, and that is for the towns that are in the path of the Southern Reliability Link pipeline. And this is specific, well, it has both the Southern Reliability Link pipeline and the New Jersey Natch, both pipelines on it. Yeah. Okay, so you have 2 versions. One is for the route of the pipeline, and then the other is if you are outside of the route, but you still want your township to pass a resolution, you can. You don't have to live on the path of the pipeline to pass a resolution like this. It can be, you can live in Mount Laurel and pass a resolution opposing the Southern Reliability Link pipeline, even though it doesn't go through Mount Laurel. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Jaclyn's going to talk more about how do you actually get it passed, because one person might support it, but you have the entire other body that doesn't. So how do you do that? Other questions? Okay. So this is the first. This is more for the online audience to see what a resolution looks like, but it'll typically start with all the reasons why you should oppose this pipeline. And for the one we've written there, and what we think is going to work is that there are, in the resolution, we've included a lot about this affecting our health and our safety, as well as property values and environmental impacts as well. And so you have a lot of the whereases, and then at the bottom, you talk about, at the end of the resolution, it'll say, therefore be it resolved that the state will do the following things. And so there's a list of what we're asking for them to agree to. And then at the end, it's who we're asking them to forward this copy to, which includes Governor Christie, state assembly members and senators, Nancy Wittenberg, the BPU, who's the executive director of the Pinelands Commission, the BPU, the DEP, our organizations, and county level councils. Yeah, all the different officials that need to see this.
Make sure you address Nancy Whitberg as Madam Nancy Whitberg.
Oh. Okay. Can I be called Madam?
Sold out, she's sold out.
I don't need to be a madam. Okay. All right. All right. Now we're going to talk about how to pass the resolution.
Okay, so learn about what a resolution is, in which, how many people are already familiar with what resolutions are or what they do? Yes, a number of people. Okay, good. And you've heard of them, or if you've ever attended a council meeting in your town or a county meeting, they have a long list sometimes of resolutions because, again, it's an opinion statement that they're trying to make. They use it very frequently to honor someone, to oppose something, et cetera, et cetera. How does it happen, though? And typically, if you're on the inside, these things can happen very easily and very quickly. If you're on the outside looking in, and especially if it's something that that particular town maybe isn't quite sure about, maybe not aware of, and also may have a differing opinion, it can actually be very challenging to get a town or county to pass a resolution. Just so you know, I had worked on Keep It Green campaign. So it was the campaign to get the ballot question approved by New Jersey voters to have continued dedicated funding for open space acquisition, farmland, historic preservation. One of our strategies was getting all of the counties in the state to pass a resolution in favor of that question. We were successful in getting all but 2 counties to pass a resolution. Some were very easy, and we went through the process of just emailing them and mailing them a cover letter with the resolution asking them to pass it. You get a handful that passed it. Some you never heard back from, so you get people to go to that town or to that county that know the freeholders, that very much are familiar with the process, regularly attend county meetings, go to the public portion, say, we'd like you to pass this resolution, maybe talk to a couple of freeholders afterwards, and then they got the resolution passed. Then there were some that weren't really interested. There was a debate amongst the freeholders where like 2 were in favor, 2 were against, maybe 1 wasn't quite sure. It required several meetings, several conversations, bringing in tons of people to attend these meetings before they finally passed. So obviously you have these different levels in which resolutions can either be very quickly or take a while. So this is like the process we went through as a result of that. So if you are going to your town, and even if you don't have the pipeline going through your community or even through your county, you can still ask the town to take a position. We need your support. You're within the Pinelands. It's affecting us. This could be your community next. What is the motivation, the reasoning? You have to find a way to resonate with that individual. And ideally, you want to talk first with someone you know, if at all possible. So whether or not you know somebody that's on the council, whether or not you know someone that's a freeholder, that you could talk to them one-on-one, that you know might be in favor of, in general, your position. That's kind of your first avenue. See where you can get with having that initial conversation. If you don't know anyone like that to talk to, your second bet would be to talk directly to the Environmental Commission, if you have one in your community, and talk to those individuals on that board and see if they're interested in the cause. And that could be a way because they are familiar with and know the council directly or the freeholders, that then you can have that greater conversation. So I'll get into a little bit more detail with some of these steps, but just overall, that would be your first thing. Know your community. Yes. Yes. No. It was Ocean, and then I want to say that it was, let's see, we got Cape May, Cumberland, Burlington, Atlantic. I think it was Sussex. Yeah. Yeah. It took a long time, I can't even remember, but.
On the Penny's pipeline, they went down that whole 110-mile stretch and got every township, I believe, except for 2 townships to pass resolutions.
In favor or against, you're saying? Against, right? Yes. So you were saying that the network. Yes. Yeah. I know there are a lot of local opposition. Just checking. Yes, it is. It is, and it's a great tool. So people were saying, asking about the open space initiative, how many which counties didn't pass, and then also on the Penn East pipeline that a number of communities passed resolutions. So know your community. It's important to know, who are the activists, who are the people that are interested in this issue. Kind of build your network, because if you don't have that relationship, or that your county or municipality is not going to be in favor of this, or there's a mixed opinion on those individuals that serve on the council, you want community members that can weigh in with those individuals. So you want to start networking, and obviously a lot of you here know your community, to know how to then build your coalition for the group that will attend these meetings, that will regularly bring that message, just like we did with the Pinelands Commission, right? Similar strategy, building your coalition, knowing who can talk to certain individuals, and bringing that issue time and again. If there's a case where your community isn't necessarily informed or well aware of these issues, hosting and organizing meeting, maybe sharing, for instance, what we did tonight, which we are actually recording, that you can then share and have people listen in on the status of the pipelines, and the second portion, what you can do. They can listen to one or both portions of tonight's presentation. Building public awareness, variety of ways to do that. Reporters, letters to the editor. Again, all this we did with South Jersey Gas Pipeline, right? Several people wrote op-ed pieces, you had editorials, you contacted reporters, they wrote articles, they came to the meetings. That's all great way to build up awareness, especially within your community. So if you're trying to get your town to pass a resolution, you want to have your local reporter, what people read. And it could be even things like getting things on certain websites, like if there's a green team or environmental commission or a local group sharing information in their newsletter. All those are great tools for doing that. And then you have your strategy. You have your network, you have your coalition, people are aware, you know where the town or county stands, and you say, okay, this is what we need to do. Either we just hand it to one council person or freeholder, they'll get it passed. That's the easiest. There's some mixed signals. We need to have some awareness building. We need to let these people know that the community cares. We have to attend so many meetings, and then we should have some luck. If it's not so easy, and you're really going to have to push hard, then you'll have your strategy 3 or C, whatever you want to call it. And that's where you have to really do all the things in terms of going to the media, attending all those meetings, and so on and so forth. And even in the end, if you can't get a resolution passed, you have raised so much awareness and pulled in so much of the community that it will prove to be effective for maybe some other issue down the line, or overall in the big picture. In terms of, especially as it relates to the pipelines that we're dealing with. So here's some of the tips. So I was saying before that if you don't know a council member or some municipal officials, maybe you might know the mayor. Maybe you know a neighbor that knows the mayor, is a cousin of the mayor, who knows, but you find those connections. Going to the Environmental Commission, or if you have a green team in your community, are also good ways to get in the door. Or Board of Health. So especially as it relates to some of the pipelines where you have going through communities, you have safety issues, also that can be very helpful. Talking to the members of the community that may attend the Environmental Commission. So let's say you go to Environmental Commission meetings to begin with. There are public that maybe attend some of those meetings, or you can have the Environmental Commission put it on their agenda to have a discussion, which then raises awareness and lets people know about this issue coming before them. And ask them if you can make a case. If you don't know them, if for whatever reason they maybe are hesitant about this issue, ask them if you can have it on the agenda to have the conversation and bring it to their attention, so you have a good debate about the issue before getting people to just say no. Now, if you have Environmental Commission or Green Team or Board of Health that is supportive, they can actually pass their own resolution or supporting documentation that can support the cause. So in terms of the open space campaign that I was involved with for the ballot question, we actually had environmental commissions that passed their own resolution, or Board of Health that had passed their own resolution. We even had like historic preservation committees, which of course for that issue was relevant. So there may be certain committees that even if you can't get the town, you could get those individuals, and that sends a message. And you want them to share it with the council. You want them to share it to the county. They could share with the newspapers and the reporters, and again, raising awareness and bringing to attention, all with the goal of showing that there's coordinated support, that the community is concerned about an issue in order to stop these issues, these pipelines from happening. And then finally, again, once you go through all those steps, you go to the council and you could say, please put it on the agenda. Even if it's not the resolution to vote it up or down, say, let's have a discussion about it. And maybe you could pull in some experts, some of the groups that are involved in these issues, to then talk about it as well. Oh, I thought you had a question. Yes, or you could bring the Jersey Devil to one of the meetings, and that will really, raise the hair on the back of their neck that they need to do something about this. That's a good one. So, by each town passing a resolution, it encourages neighbors to do the same. And that's what we'd like to see. I mean, we're faced with right now, first it was one pipeline. Now we have a second one. There are pipelines being proposed all throughout the state. And overall, we have a big issue in New Jersey, lack of planning, lack of coordination, how this is all going to impact the state, residents, the environment, the economy, the safety, that if all towns really focus in on even just their pipeline, but it raises awareness that we could turn around and say, we have 200 municipalities in the state opposed to these pipelines. I think that sends a strong message. And we send it to BPU, we send it to Congress even, that whether it be how FERC operates, which is dealing with the pipelines that cross into New Jersey and then into Pennsylvania, versus the Pinelands Commission, which, has a seat by someone appointed from the Department of Interior, and usually it's the National Park Service. We're sending a message that poor planning is taking place, that something needs to be done. And whether or not it's just the local projects that we're trying to fight to stop, whether through the Pinelands Commission or some other portion of the state, I think if we band together and work on this issue, whether or not it directly affects your community or not, whether or not it even falls within the Pinelands boundary. I mean, there's the Highlands, there's so many other sensitive areas that it will make a big difference in how these projects move forward and any new projects that might come online in the future. So this is critical. This presents a really good opportunity. This is the way to work with your community, with your town. This is the first step to send the message. Resolutions can play a very important role. It's one that several campaigns use, as I had mentioned, with the open space, the ballot question. We're building the coalition. We have so many different groups involved, local, statewide, even those that are national. And that's how we're going to make a difference. And obviously we won once. We can do it again. I think we need to sometimes change the strategy, change the tactics. It's great attending the Pinelands Commission meetings. It's great attending when the Board of Public Utilities, BPU, has their hearing. But to be able to bring it back to your community and your town and have a piece of paper that really says, we are not in favor of this, can send an important message and really keeps everyone working together, moving along that path for a better future for the state.
Will there be any kind of gatherings like this covering landowner rights for the folks who are actually in the path of that pipeline?
That is a very good question, whether or not there will be any training sessions, informational sessions about landowner rights where pipelines come through someone's backyard, for instance. And I know they were doing that in some of the North Jersey projects. Yes. 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 So what we're trying to do right now in terms of like Pinelands Preservation Alliance, Food and Water Watch, several other groups, is looking at how we can all join forces. So several groups are involved in multiple pipeline fights. So obviously Pinelands Preservation Alliance, our focus, our mission is on the Pinelands, but we want to join and help support our fellow groups that are fighting similar issues and how we can replicate efforts. And so like the resolution being one idea, but also trainings and different sessions that we can hold. So that's a good question. One, that if that is something they're doing, whether or not it's something we can share as well.
I'm just curious because I know eminent domain is a lot different when it's just in your state and it's not crossing state lines. I know
Right.
it's a lot different.
Right, right. Yeah, so definitely the FERC process is very different than what we are experiencing here, and takes a lot longer. There are issues as it relates to, crossing through homeowners' properties as opposed to most of the areas we had to deal with were on rights of ways. So, then you wouldn't necessarily have too many individuals that were directly affected where it violates their property rights. FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, because you have pipelines that go through and across two states that requires this next level for the federal government to review that type of infrastructure. FERC, right?
It's misleading because it gives you the impression that it's actually a government agency. It is not a government agency. It's a conglomerate of all of the power companies who are governing themselves. It is not a government agency.
And again, that process doesn't play out for the pipelines that affect the Pinelands right now. So.
With the South Jersey pipeline for the Pinelands, opponents say it's about jobs, it's about reliability, it's about clean energy. And all of the municipalities, or most of the municipalities within the Pinelands have already approved resolutions to support the pipeline.
For South Jersey gas, yes.
And the freeholders as well.
That have passed through those areas. Yes, you're right.
Another way of doing it is to change the whole approach, like 22,000
Mm-hmm.
signatures. Against the pipeline. But what do you do in that situation? Because they've already staked the claim on that.
Right. So the question was, what else can you do when, for instance, South Jersey gas, it's a little different dynamic where you've had the municipalities give resolutions in support of that particular pipeline. You have a different dynamic with New Jersey Natural Gas where you've had communities that are opposing it as it's going through their neighborhood. We also, there was a change.org petition that received 22,000 signatures regarding South Jersey gas. Definitely something that could be done for New Jersey natural gas pipeline, but what else can be done in South Jersey regarding that particular pipeline? And that's why we had phrased the resolution to deal with both pipelines, to go to communities outside of that particular route that had already passed resolutions in favor, to say, this is our Pinelands. It's not just about through your community, but if you have a whole nother 20 municipalities that say we're opposed to it because it violates the plan and this is poor planning and it has an impact on the Pinelands, this could potentially have an impact on our aquifer, we care because we will be affected if in some way it does affect our aquifer. So I think there's still an opportunity to go to municipalities even outside of those that directly have the pipeline going through their backyard. No, as far as I know, they're separate companies, two different entities, private.
And are they owned by, is the stock traded over Wall Street? Public company or private?
It is traded for South Jersey gas. I don't know too much about New Jersey natural gas, but I believe so. Excuse me, what is that? Somebody wants to know if it was publicly traded, both New Jersey natural gas and South Jersey gas. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. You own stock?
I used to own stock.
Oh, okay.
Sold it for a negative. No, I got rid of, divested fossil fuels about a year.
Good for you. So an individual actually had stock in South Jersey Gas. Although that might have been helpful because, you could be aware of any decisions that they're making at that time. Yes.
Question going back to your first section. Does the Pinelands commissioners have the power to override the decision by their staff?
That is a very good question. One in which we have never experienced. So the question was whether or not the Pinelands commissioners have the ability to override staff's decisions. The way that the comprehensive management plan works and how the rules are written out, there is no clause, no ability for the commissioners to override a staff decision per se. Whether or not they could pass their own resolution, make their own statement that they disagree with what the staff says, that would be something definitely new and we've never seen before. That could be a possibility that they can make that statement. I think it's all within their right, but it wouldn't necessarily override that decision. Yes.
Is it Madam Executive Director Wittenbottom?
Winbottom.
Appointed position or?
It is the executive director is hired by the commissioners. Yes, the executive director then hires the other staff. They can. So the question was, can they fire the executive director? Yes, the commissioners can fire. It is within their responsibility to fire the executive director. Again, not that we have seen, but that possibility still lingers.
I mean, I put that the executive director was appointed by the governor, so that's not correct. The ending of the New Jersey gas, I got even my magnifying glass, and I can't hear it in. But is that by the way the SEBA guidance plan? It looks like it's kind of.
I don't exactly know the exact locations in Manchester and Ocean County where it terminates for the New Jersey natural gas pipeline. Oh, were there any questions? So if people don't mind, we were just going to see whether or not there were any questions by the audience online. I believe this question here I had already responded to before, and it's not letting me open it. Oh, maybe because I had already opened it. So if anybody's online and they hear me, if you have a question, you can raise your hand or type in a question. You can let me know. Okay, I don't see any, although they could be typing. So we'll give them a minute. Does anybody else have any other questions for myself or Lena?
What is the best strategy, do you think, besides the resolution? Because that's really so long-winded and we're really up against it within the finances.
Well, we have to remember now.
MOA, there's a committee, subcommittee now looking at the memorandum agreement.
That is correct. So the question is what are some other strategies? Leading up to a resolution, actually all of those strategies are strategies you would implement otherwise, right? Building awareness, making sure you have your coalition, going to the local meetings, all of that are steps that you could duplicate no matter what level you're in. So keeping aware of the process overall, which is what we tried to do at the beginning of the presentation, was, where does this all stand? So because both New Jersey Natural Gas and South Jersey Gas are putting in private applications, and because we have to evaluate that procedure now, obviously building your network, letting people know, going to your towns while we are prepping and waiting for that timeline, as well as those public meetings, is critical, right? You want to do that work ahead of time so you're ready to go, because we're not sure of what kind of timeline we're dealing with. In addition, we will let people know when BPU will have a public comment period, which actually is soon for New Jersey Natural Gas. I believe it's going to be due later in June. And we will post that date and let people know that they could put in comments there. For South Jersey Gas, again, because they've gotten their approval, whether or not they'd have to go through this process again with BPU, I doubt it. But again, we're getting clarification on that procedure as well. I think raising as much awareness as possible now that it's a private development application changes the focus from the Pinelands commissioners, which I think putting pressure on them, because behind the scenes, they can put pressure on the staff. They can put pressure on the executive director saying, we don't think this is a good idea. They will review the application. They have every right and opinion to make to the staff about how they feel about these pipelines, whether or not they meet the criteria of the comprehensive management plan. And if they feel their voices aren't heard and the staff completely ignores their suggestions, opinions, obviously that will put them in a different position on how they feel about keeping that individual in power on the staff. So I think they can make a difference. I think still attending Pinelands Commission meetings and giving comments about these applications can be helpful, although, again, because we're not sure about the process, you may have counsel say that we cannot take comments on that, as you've experienced, obviously, in the past. So, again, this is still, because we have yet to see something like this before, we still need clarification. So, in the meantime, going to your towns, talking to your community, building up those resolutions can all prepare and becoming knowledgeable about these issues and where they stand, especially about the new pipeline. You can be ready for that second step of the process. Yes. Mm-hmm. Can you try to get that question up? He can behind the scenes, but again, because it may be we have to open up one of the go-to screen. He may not even be involved necessarily in voting because it won't come before the commission. So his recusal applies when he has to make a direct decision on the applications. He can, for New Jersey Natural Gas, because the situation doesn't apply, he could definitely weigh in on that situation. Again, commissioners can informally talk to the staff about these applications. Again, assuming that council allows that kind of interaction depending upon what she feels are the rules to follow regarding the application process.
Do we know if there are any historic sites in the path of the pipeline?
For either. Not that we're aware for the first one. The second one, I'm not sure. Yeah, we have to go through and look through that. So the question was whether or not there are any historic sites. So we had one online user raise their hand. They had a question.
It was from Nancy. Can we tell her that we asked her question? But it said 33 minutes ago, so maybe it was.
Okay. All right. Nancy, I will try to get to your question, but I hold it up. Yeah, but it wouldn't open. So as we deal with the chat issue here and try to answer some of the questions online, we are at about 8:35. And I know some people are interested in some shirts and things, and we said we would end at 8:30. So I just wanted to make sure that we answer any really critical issues right now, and then maybe would release the group, and then we'll be here to answer questions towards the end. But go ahead.
I was wondering if you're making a Facebook group citizens against the pipeline to have a more organized effort. So like sometimes I'm rooting through my email to try and find like.
Sure. Hmm. Well, that's a good question. So the question was whether or not there would be a Facebook group dedicated to like citizens opposing pipelines, whether or not it, I feel like there is one, but I'm not 100%, not one that we formed. Well, yeah, that's don't gas the Pinelands, but whether or not pipeline wide, for all communities, I'm sure. But it may be a good idea. Don't gas the Pinelands. Yes, it's a group from Georgina. Yes, from Georgina Shanley. So if that's it, we'll be around. There's, I'll bring over T-shirts. But thank you all for coming. I'm sorry. What was? Yeah.
If you didn't already, make sure you get materials on the back table and sign in as well.
All right. Take care, everyone. Uh, Now she had answered it. I had opened the question before,